Mr. Scot Faulkner.
Scot Faulkner was elected the first Chief Administrative Officer of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1995. Previously, he served in several capacities in the Reagan Administration. Mr. Faulkner is the author of The Naked Emperors, The Failure of the Republican Revolution, and he advises international corporations on strategic change and leadership. On January 18, 2008, Mr. Faulkner addressed the Panhandle Tiger Bay Club on the topic, Reclaiming Our Government, a citizen agenda for the 2008 elections.
The big problem in Washington is there is no glory in good management. People don't celebrate clean audits. People don't celebrate budget reductions and efficiencies. They celebrate expansions. Politicians want to cut ribbons. Politicians want to announce initiatives. It's also easier to add something than it is to change something. So what happens is government grows one press release at a time, and that's how it always happens. I have two predictions about this election cycle because this is about the 2008 election. The first one is that the candidate who promises change will become our next president. And secondly, there will be no change. And this is a very sad situation because there's going to be 570 congressional seats up for play. This is the 435 members, voting members of the House, the 5 non-voting members, and then the people in the Senate that are up. I mean, there's just an awful lot of people who are actually 470, a lot of people who are in play, and all of them are talking change. All of them are part of the problem, and all of them want to remain part of the problem. At the presidential level, for the first time since 1928, 80 years ago, we have a wide open presidential race on both sides. And this should be a moment of a great crossroads in this country, and yet it really isn't. It is all about performance art, not about the substance. And that's really the sad commentary about how Washington operates. Most candidates who run for office don't really want change. My time up as CAO, I was also a staffer on the Hill in the 70s. I was a legislative liaison with FAA to Congress in the 80s. And so for many years, I got to see this in action. And basically, most members, when they get up there, their primary purpose is to muscle their way to the trough, not for their constituents, but for themselves. The rest, who do want change, simply don't know how to do it. They know how to do management by press release. They know how to announce initiatives. They know how to form task forces. They know how to announce studies. They know how to propose legislation. But that's all they know how to do. They don't know how to actually make it happen. And in many cases, outcomes is not what they want, because when an issue is in play, the money is in play, the press releases are in play. Solutions aren't something that garner the kinds of headlines that crises do. So that's one of the big problems. So, Tsunami Tuesday happens, and we either have presumptive nominees for both parties and 6 months of buyer's remorse. August 25th is the Democratic convention out in Denver, September 1st, Republican convention out in Minneapolis. The other option is this ridiculously compressed primary season ends up with a 2-way tie in the Democratic side and a 3- or 4-way tie in the Republican side. And because both parties and all these nominees that are coming forward have lobbyists and full-time political consultants running their campaigns, the dirty little secret is all the people behind the scenes know each other, have been in the same lobby firms together, the same consulting firms together over the years. So no matter who wins, the same group of people, what we call the puppeteers versus the puppets, are going to still be walking in the door of that White House. What's even worse is that they probably want to do brokered conventions, which we haven't had since the Republican convention of '52. Newt Gingrich, who opted not to run for president back in October because his nationwide teach-in on government reform, he held a party and no one showed up. That was really the reason why he didn't choose to run. But he's already positioning, as recently as yesterday, for that brokered convention to try to emerge as a Republican nominee on the House, on the Republican side. So this isn't over yet. Either way, we're going to end up with the dust settling either mid-February or late August and early September. But the same power cluster that has run Washington for decades is going to continue running Washington. The media is complicit in this because when you watch any of the talking heads, some of whom are screaming heads, they really are critiquing the performance art. They are drama critics. They're also kind of color commentators like sportscasters. They really are looking at the game and at the race. Very few interviews. Certainly the debates don't really get into much substance. The coverage doesn't get into much substance. And this is really what allows these candidates to get away with the kind of campaigns they run and ultimately the kinds of governance they provide you. And that's where it gets worse. There is going to be hope down the line, don't worry. But all these candidates who become elected, on one front, the ones that really don't want to do anything for you, they begin hiding their record as quickly as they get there. Those who really are sincere about change and really do want to do the right thing, they run into the buzzsaw of the status quo. And very few of them, no matter how good a people they are and how sincere they are, once they get sworn in, it gets back to political preservation. They don't want to expend any political capital or put any of their future at risk, and whether that's a future as an elected official or a future as a lobbyist, because again, many members now don't come back home. They stay up in Washington and go native. And so the key is they also realize that they can't go back to their constituents and say the system beat me or I'm not ready to take on the system. So they also began hiding what actually is happening up there. Give you a couple examples. A whole bunch of Democrats got elected in 2006 from Republican-dominated congressional districts. And they went up there saying, I'm going to be an independent voice for change. I'm not going to follow Nancy Pelosi. I'm going to represent my constituents. Guess what? They're all following Nancy Pelosi. But what they have done is there's something called a loyalty index, which is when a party puts forth an official position, how often do you vote for that party versus against it? They've discovered that every day the House of Representatives votes on the Journal, the Congressional Record. It's a perfunctory vote. It's done every day. It basically serves as a quorum call to get everyone to the floor so that 1-minute speeches and the real business can take place. But it does count as a leadership vote. They are voting against the Congressional Record every day. And so some of them have been able to drive their party loyalty score down by 35% to artificially show, look at how different I am from Nancy Pelosi. You know, I opposed her on the Journal of the Congress.